public events can be found at performingarts.wsu.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, September 22, 2014 Public Works Finance Committee meeting. The Administrative Committee couldn't find enough to do to have them meet today, so we took their time, and we'll be taking care of all of the committee work this week for the Moscow City Council. I'm Walter Steed, President of the Council, Chairman of this committee. To my right is Dan Carscallon, Council Member. To my left, Art Betke, Council Member. To his left, the return from a week of meetings, Gary Reedner, City Supervisor. First item on the agenda is the approval of the September 8, 2014 minutes, and I was not there, so it's up to you two.
I'm okay with them if Art is.
Me too. We'll consider them approved, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay, item 2, 525 South Jackson Streetscape Enhancement Development Agreement. Les McDonald, please. I guess we approved the minutes too fast.
Question in my ear back there. I was trying to listen to both. Okay, theory. There we go. All right, this is an item that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, just as an initial briefing of something that we thought was coming your way and was coming together. It is closer now to fruition, but not quite there yet. But thought we'd bring you this next step, which would be the development agreement, or actually an enhanced development agreement. Associated with the property at 525 South Jackson Street, which is the site of the new Jimmy John's that's currently under construction. And when we talked about this before, I took you through kind of a quick overview of the location, so I'll show you a little bit of that just to refresh everybody's memory. This is a site located on the northwest corner of Jackson Street and 6th, so what's shown here in the red is the Jimmy John's. The area we're talking about for frontage improvements would be along this east edge of that site, which is the western edge of Jackson Street, with just a little bit right here on the 6th Street side, as I'll explain in just a moment. Just a couple of Google Earth shots showing what that streetscape looks like today. Again, the site is here, and they're going to be building their building essentially right up to the point where this little rail fence was located. It's now gone. And we have talked with them about the concept of doing a frontage improvement similar to that being done in front of the EMSI site. Came through here in the last couple of months. So as part of that, we've been working with the landowner, the developer, working with Hodge and Associates on a design and having discussions with ITD about the concept that is being proposed. What is before you today is really a development agreement similar to the one for the EMSI property that spells out what the role would be of the city and what the role would be of the developer with respect to making improvements. The concept in terms of the improvements themselves, this is a little bit different version of the site drawing, if you will, that you saw previously. Essentially what we're looking at here is the existing curb line shown in the lighter gray. Kind of comes right on down through there and on down to the corner. Similar to the EMSI site, the proposal is to take that curb out and then reconstruct it further out closer to the westerly southbound lane on Jackson Street. And by doing that, we would displace the parking that is in that area. There would still be parking on here to the north at this point, and would end up with a wider sidewalk section, which would then allow room for new street trees that would be further removed from the building face, which will be right along that property line. Also, the installation of some of the vintage style street lights like we have in College that are also going to be in front of the MSI property further north of this site. The one addition on 6th Street that I mentioned would be right here. There is an existing Cobra Head luminaire at that point. We're going to be that close with the curb ramps and all that on the corner. Thought it was appropriate to go ahead and replace that one with the vintage light at the same time. So that would get that far around the corner, if you will. with those types of improvements.
Before you leave that
Yes.
photo, Les,
Mhm.
does the new curb line sit right on the existing right turn lane striping? Do you know?
The curb line, I believe, sits back a little bit westerly of that line. When you put a curb up against a travel lane like that, you usually have to add a couple of feet extra width for shy distance off the curb. And so I believe, and the design is not done on this, but I believe what we'll see coming out of it is that curb line will be set back probably about 2 feet from what would be the kind of that dividing stripe, if you will, between the southbound lane and the right turn lane that's there. Now, it would be a similar layout to what we saw further north.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but there'll be no change in the through lanes. The traffic lanes will stay where they are.
The through traffic lanes would stay as they are.
Okay.
The right turn pocket that is there today, which is located generally right in this area, it starts right about this north property line. That's the last parking stall. And we have a lane that goes from that point down to the corner. It's a fairly narrow turn lane. I would consider it to be substandard in width. The length of the turn lane is probably also substandard based on highway standards. But it is there, and it is used. Based on some traffic count information we have from the multimodal transportation plan effort, we see approximately 10% of the traffic on Jackson Street southbound during that peak hour using that turn lane. So roughly 70, 75 turns out of about 780 or so vehicles passing through there in an hour are using a right turn at that location. So roughly 10%. One of the questions that was raised has been, well, if that right turn lane goes away, does that create problems? Because some people do use it, obviously around 10%. If it was not there, which would be the case with this change, then the westerly of the three southbound lanes would become a combined lane, so through to the south and also a right turn heading on to 6th Street West. With the number at 10% in the overall and 3 lanes available heading southbound, that doesn't strike me as being particularly problematic. We're still assessing that, and we'll be with ITD as they take a look at this concept. They're aware of what the concept is that is proposed. The preliminary construction drawings for this that can go to ITD for review are anticipated to come in either yet today or tomorrow. And so those will be transferred down to ITD for their review and consideration. They have to approve this. It's something that goes through their permitting process. They've expressed interest in the past about continuing that EMSI type improvement all the way through the corridor between 3rd and 6th, but they've also expressed some concern about the potential loss of that right turn lane. So we'll see what their response is when we get plans down to them, because that's what they need to really give us a true answer.
So say they deny it, then what's our course of action?
If they deny it, it is their highway. And really the course of action at that point is to say, okay, either we just back away from it and say it's not feasible here because of that turn lane, or as an alternative we look at, all right, if we modify that turn lane in some fashion, maybe it's shortened a bit but still exists near the south end, near the intersection, but we create the bump out up here somewhere with the intent that maybe someday it continues on to the north. That's a possibility. It becomes a question of, as you shorten that, what I think is already a probably short turn lane, that much further, what's the effectiveness? And does it just become kind of a de facto swerve through it on your way to the right-hand turn just because it's too short? And that can happen, so we have to avoid that.
People don't really line up in it like a right turn lane as a rule. They tend to, like you say, swerve into it.
Yeah, they kind of veer through it. And
Les, a moment ago, you mentioned losing parking spaces. Are we really going to lose any?
And actually, in this case, no, we would not, because that last stall ends right there at about that property line. After that, to the south, is the right turn lane. So in this case, we would not lose any parking. If we were to extend any further north in the future, then yes, we would.
So following up on Dan's comment, if they deny it, ITD denies it, what's the fate of the street trees that have now been removed, is there a way to put them back in, or does it just turn into sidewalk desert?
Right, that's something we would certainly have to assess with our Parks Department and our city arborist. Part of the concern here is how close to the building would those trees be located, for the potential for root conflict or branches, getting out into the building face itself. With the right tree selection, more of a columnar style rather than the rounded style that we have today, the branch issue is less of a factor. So there may be a way that they could be replaced essentially with what's out there without creating a conflict of the building. So that's a possibility. The challenge there, though, is that sidewalk is narrow enough. If we put a tree back in there, how much sidewalk space is left between the tree or the tree well and the edge of the property, the right-of-way? Is it enough to be accessible and meet the standards there? It's pretty tight in there, so I don't know yet if that would truly be an option.
As Art mentioned, those two trees that were there have come out, and I believe that was not because of this proposal, although this would have required it if sequence of events had been such, but that building up to the property line per code and as permitted, they got into the roots of those trees as well as would have gotten with the building up into the crown of it as well. So they pretty much had to come out of there regardless.
There was a plan to replace them no matter what.
Well, I don't know that there was initially, but I mean the subject did come up, and in the end, obviously, it became an issue as they delved further into the project. It's a case, frankly, of a tree, probably the wrong tree in the amount of space that we have available. Because, again, it's a narrow sidewalk. There's not much room between the curb and the property line, and yet we've got pretty substantial trees. That kind of thing is bound to happen as you have redevelopment next to mature trees of that type. Okay. So, similar to the discussion we had on the MSI parcel, there has been work done to look at how the city and the developer and the property owner could team on this project to make this type of improvement happen. Again, this was not an improvement that is required by the development of the property. They were not required to make any fringe improvements because it was already in place. Right? Maybe not what we would like to have seen, but it was there. And so Jimmy Johns and the developer took on the concept of replacing the existing walks that were out there because they wanted to see a more finished, clean product done, and some of the walks that were there were not in particularly good condition. And so they kind of started down that path, and then we came into the discussion about, well, should we consider expanding this similar to what we've done elsewhere on the corridor? But along with that becomes, okay, how do you deal with the cost? So we have put together a package with them, similar to what we've done in the past, where we'd have a combination of costs, and it's detailed by line item or construction line item in your packet, that smaller text. But this is a summary here on the screen that essentially indicates where funding would come from for what's roughly a $73,000 overall project. Sidewalk program, again, granting about $8,800. Similar to what we've done elsewhere in downtown, where it's a 30% of overall sidewalk cost type of participation in the downtown core. The pavement management program would participate about $9,700. This really has to do with some of the street rework and the curbs and storm drainage aspects. Street light program for what would now be 3 new lights, actually replacements of 2, I believe, in that location. Street division labor, that would be our crew time to actually go in and do the demo on the existing curb and some remaining sidewalk, particularly around the corner that's there. The arts program for tree grates, artistic tree grates again. And then the developer funding at just under $40,000. This is a number that we've worked on with them. They are comfortable with it, as I understand it. It is a cost that potentially is eligible under the URA Public Infrastructure Reimbursement Program, and I believe there's interest to that. Gary can probably touch on that if desired. And so it's, that's generally the breakdown that's proposed and how we would suggest this would move forward, assuming we get the approvals from ITD and the council and continue on down this path.
Is the sidewalk program 8885 coming out of 2014 or 2015?
Well, at the moment, it would be out of the 2014 program, and we've kind of set aside or identified.
My reason for asking is that I feel like we're really utilizing that program and those funds, and we used them up at EMSI, we're using them here, we're really pulling them down.
Yeah, between the two jobs, I think we're in the neighborhood of about 15,000, and we have identified that, yes, there's enough funding left in 14 to cover this. It may be that actually doesn't get paid out until the 15 fiscal year, but that money rolls in the capital program, so that's just fine.
As long as Mr. Palmer understands that's how he's doing it.
Well, that one resides in capital, so it'll stay. The 15 funding, of course, is substantially lower in the sidewalk program than what we have this year in 14. So that's why we've identified it with some of the remaining money in the 14 program.
Okay. Yes, sir.
On your Exhibit B, the term sheet, you've got a couple columns over the right-hand side where you have the developer funding and Jimmy John's funding, and Jimmy John's is a big blank column. Is there anything contemplated from there?
Well, it's really one and the same, and originally it started out as sidewalk funding and just Jimmy John's funding. What's not there, if you look at line item number 3, which is remove and dispose of concrete sidewalk, you'll see there's no price attached to that. That was previously a dollar amount there, and it showed up then in that sidewalk funding, and that was the removal of the existing walk that they've already done. So just really to simplify this a little bit, that dollar amount was taken out. It's already a cost they've borne. And so there really was no reason to show it again.
Well, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I'm in favor of the improvements all the way up and down the street there. That's, kind of been the thing since we started this is, and it sounds like ITD is leaning that direction too. I mean, we don't know, but this should move forward as far as historical discussions with them. So, I'm in favor of moving it forward.
Makes sense to me, too, especially with the widening of the sidewalk, not taking up anything more than a semi-useless right turn lane, and providing the ability to replant trees there more appropriately, and providing a better streetscape for pedestrians, and improving that whole west side of Jackson. It's a good thing to be doing, in my opinion.
Okay, let's move it on consent, Gary, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Les. Bill Belknap is coming forward to talk about the Steiner White Avenue Underpass Concept Professional Services Agreement.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You're good. As the council is aware, this project has been an item of discussion for about the last 3 years, and hopefully we're going to get into the stage where we can start to move forward and get a little bit of progress. So to provide a little bit of background, in 2011, city staff were approached by Fritz Fiedler at the University of Idaho looking for a senior civil engineering student class project. At that time, we suggested that the students could look at, and they're looking at something that was hydrologically related, but also was multidisciplinary and that it had some transportation-related components to the project. At that point in time, staff had suggested that the students could look at the existing bridge structure at the Steiner White Avenue and Highway 8 intersection for a possible grade-separated pedestrian passageway underneath the existing bridge structure. Highway 8 serves as a significant barrier to access to the Paradise Path. There's a large swath of the existing developed area of the city that's north of Highway 8, and the Paradise Path is located on the south side of the highway, and a grade-separated crossing would enhance access to that pedestrian pathway facility and access onto the University of Idaho campus in downtown. The students completed that project in the spring of 2011, and they concluded that they felt that the pedestrian underpass was feasible with some enhancements to the conveyance underneath the bridge structure. Actually, they were showing 2 feet decreased elevation of floodwaters during the 50-year event. And the Paradise, subsequent to that, the Paradise Path Task Force identified the project as their number one priority project. It has also been identified as a high priority project within the Moscow on the Move transportation plan. So just to kind of provide a little bit of orientation, this is figure 13.3 out of the Moscow on the Move plan that identified needs of linkages across the pedestrian and pathway system. What we're talking about is down here at the intersection of White and 95, and this red arrow that indicates the need for a crossing enhancement. There's one located there at the Steiner and White intersection, also one located at the Mountain View and Highway 8 intersection. As you can see, the pathway there shown in green runs along the south side of the highway corridor, east-west through the community, and there the highway obviously is located just north of the pathway. And there's a large portion of the developed area in the center core of the community that really is somewhat blocked from getting access to the pathway facility due to the highway and the difficulty in crossing the highway at certain periods of time. And so that crossing point at Steiner and White Avenue would really be fairly centrally located for that neighborhood to try to gain access to the path facility. The actual project itself has been identified as a crossing enhancement across the highway in the 20-year bike network and pedestrian plan in that document as well. To provide a little bit of closer view, again, this is White Avenue on the north, Highway 8 angling through the photo, and Steiner on the south side. What is being proposed is some form of pedestrian pathway that would come off the shoulder of White Avenue, extend down, across underneath the bridge structure, and then traverse its way back up to the Paradise Path located on the south side of the highway. So while this is no design, this just shows you the general location of that approach and the access that would be provided to the path facility. When the students did the project, they had a number of concept drawings or photographs here showing the existing structure and clearance underneath, some existing flow obstructions on the downstream side of that bridge opening. They had a cross-section they showed of about an 8-foot paved path on the 51-inch base section, and that allowed for adequate head clearance through the bridge structure. And then they had done some three-dimensional models showing the existing topography on the upstream side of the bridge and showing how that structure could angle down through the crossing and then make its way up on the other side. And this was just an illustration, a rendering of what that could look like through that bridge section.
And Pullman has something similar to this in their downtown.
Pullman does. It goes underneath an existing undercross bridge structure between the softball fields and into the downtown core. In order to advance the project, staff believes there are a number of actions that are necessary. The first of which is to validate the hydrologic and hydraulic assessment to verify the feasibility of adding the additional material in the bridge section and accommodating the flows that are necessary on the creek. We've identified that as phase one of the project. The second is really to assess the constructability of the project and establish an estimated cost of construction so we know that it's buildable and what that cost would be, which we've identified as phase two. And then the last would be to assess the environmental impacts and permitting requirements, which we've identified as phase three. So we would conduct a wetland delineation. We would assess the impacts and the permitting requirements that are necessary. So we have all the information necessary to move the project forward. And certainly that will involve coordination with the Idaho Transportation Department, as it is their bridge and their structure. So we'll need to work with them throughout the course of the project.
And to this point, they are okay with the idea?
To this point, they're okay with the idea. They worked with the class, provided them all the bridge details and drawings through the original class project, and then we touched base as recent as 2 to 3 weeks ago to let them know that the council had identified funding for phase one and that we were going to be moving forward with that, and they indicated no concern with us moving through phase one. They do want to be involved as we move farther down the road in the project, but certainly have no objection at this point in time.
And this is broken down into phases because at any point it could be shown that after phase one it ain't going to work.
If we don't have the hydrologic or
at the end of phase
capacity,
two, we might say, this isn't going to work. So each step is there for that reason.
Correct. So staff, we prepared a professional services agreement with TerraGraphics Engineering for the assessment. As you mentioned, it is in 3 individual phases. I mean, if we go through the hydraulic assessment and we can't, maintain the flood flows through there with the additional material, then we're done at that point in time. And so it is structured in that phased approach where we go through the hydrologic and hydraulic assessment. We then go through the constructability and cost estimate. I think the estimate that the students had prepared was about $59,000 for the underpass.
We've never built anything for $59,000 in this town.
$64,000 for the pedestrian bridge on College, which was a somewhat of a comparable project in some respects. But we'll need to go through each of those and make sure that it's still feasible and we still have a desire to pursue developing additional information. So,
and as it says, you will be back at each point.
At each point. So the initial phase 1 cost is $4,200 for the hydrologic and hydraulic assessment phase of the project. Phase 2 is $6,200 for the construction design and cost estimate, and then $1,750 for phase 3 of the project. The City Council budgeted $5,000 for phase 1 during the FY15 budget process. It's been the Parks Rec administrative budget, and there's an additional $10,000 the council placed, I believe, in the non-prioritized project line item to assist in the project as it moved forward. Correct. So staff's recommendation is to recommend approval of the proposed agreement and authorize us to proceed with phase 1. With that, I'd try to answer any questions you have.
I don't know, I think we're proceeding down the right path, and the 3 phases are a great idea. And anything to generate positive momentum on this is good. We'll know soon enough whether it'll go or not, and I think we should go and do it.
Yeah, that was exactly, the phases break down how we discussed it during budget discussions is, why we only allocated that first $5,000, and then, we didn't want to put it all in the basket just in case it didn't flow. So yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward as presented.
Our goal is generally to get this completed by the end of this year if we can.
All 3 phases.
All 3 phases. There is a next round of community choices grants that are going to be coming open in middle of January, and so if it looks like this is possibly feasible, we might be able to see if there's an opportunity to make an application. If not this round, possibly the next round.
Okay, Gary, let's put it on consent, please.
Thanks,
Okay,
Bill.
thank you, Bill. Kathleen Burns is coming forward to talk about craft beer and wine sales at the Moscow Farmers Market. And not unusually, we are having Gina Terusio with the Chamber apparently
crashing the party
to help her. And Shirley Green, I'm just going to make a wild guess, is on the Farmers Market Commission. Yes. Okay. Feel like we're being teamed up on.
Yeah, we're triple team here.
So
You're going to have to work at that mic, ma'am.
okay. So in your packets, I'd given you the draft resolution that Rod, our city attorney, put together. And I also gave you a section of minutes from our May meeting with the recommendation of the Farmers Market Commission to pursue this. So with that, I'm going to get started. I wanted to prepare a PowerPoint of our neighboring farmers markets in the state of Idaho. And this is the new Boise market. It's in a parking lot in downtown Boise. And this is a list of wineries that are in their market. And I hope this is going to work. I want to take you to the Wine Commission. I highlighted the Idaho Wine Commission here because on their website it actually lists the different farmers markets that sell wine in the state of Idaho, and there's currently only 2 markets in the state that are selling wine, and it's the new Boise Farmers Market with these list of wineries, and there's also the Capital City Public Market. Sorry for the typo there. So these are the list of winery and vineyards on the street market that's on a closed city street similar to ours, and this is the Capital City Public Market.
Is that the downtown one?
Yes, it is.
And what's
right
the new,
downtown.
What's the new Boise? Where and what is it?
The new Boise is a break-off farmers market that also occurs on Saturday in a parking lot downtown.
Okay.
So if you look at the difference, this market has about 100 vendors, and it currently lists 7 on the website. This is the new farmers market, and they're already up to 6 wineries being in their little market. So Just wanted to give you a representation of what's happening in other areas of the state of Idaho. I did look up Coeur d'Alene, and I did look up Sandpoint, and neither one of them listed vineyards and wineries. So with that, the proposal is for the Friendship Square area in the market, and we highlighted that area so you could see the area we're looking at currently. In the capital city market in Boise, on the close streets, the wineries are throughout the entire market. They're not in a certain section of the market. But since this area on our map is our city public park, we thought we should start with the Friendship Square area.
Kathleen, let me stop you there if I would.
Yep. Go ahead.
You don't have a lot of room in Friendship Square on Saturday market days. It's pretty packed
pretty
between
tight.
all the things that you know are there.
Yep.
So where more specifically are you thinking about proposing to place this?
If you can see on the east side of Friendship Square where the fountain is, there's a booth there. It's usually Sticky Fingers ice cream.
I'm sorry.
Sticky Fingers ice cream.
Okay.
And between them and Affinity Farm, there's some space there for 1 or 2 booths. And then to the north side of the city tent, on the east side, there's space for a tent if they require a full 10 by 10.
Isn't that where you do your craft demonstrations?
That's usually where we do our cooking, like our kids' cooking this summer. So it is a squeeze to try. I think it would be easier if our vendors decided to come with a table space, like a $12 table space versus a full 10 by 10. So we'll have to look at what our options are for spacing. But right off the bat, Barry and I met this weekend and we kind of walked it out. There's also some area on the west side near the Moscow Hotel, on the north side of Friendship Square. There's a bulletin board there and a bus shelter. But to the west of that, there's some space.
And that's not in the fire lane?
Well, we'd have to do it adjacent to the fire lane.
Okay.
So it's a little tight in that public space. I agree. So in looking with the chamber right now, currently, I have a handout at the table for you. This is our local wineries in our region. And when we looked at our region, we looked at the Lewis and Clark Valley as well, Lewiston and Clarkston, and Moscow and Pullman. And the chambers of Moscow Chamber and also the Pullman Chamber put together these rack cards for visitors to our region. So that's currently what we have in our area. So with that, I'm coming to the table.
If I can interject.
May.
Thank you, sir. That document that Kathleen handed out to you, our winery and brewery rack card, is about the 3rd most popular document that I hand out. They like our city maps, they like our visitors' guides, they want to know where the breweries are.
Okay.
Sensible.
In the title of this item, Kathleen, it says craft beer and wine. In the text and also in the ordinance, I believe that resolution, it includes liquor.
Yes. And I put liquor in there. The reason I put liquor in there is there's now a small distillery in Lewiston that has vodka that's gaining a lot of attention.
Does the commission have an opinion on liquor versus beer wine? Shirley?
I had not heard this, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I did not hear the liquor part of it. I would have, I think that would need to be discussed more by the commission, that
Okay.
issue.
Gina, comment?
I think it would be fair to say that the commission is very much in favor of beer and or wine. That's we have discussed that. Liquor, in addition, we would need to take back to the group.
Mr. Redner?
Liquor sales are regulated differently than beer and wine sales in Idaho. It can only be sold through a dispensary or pursuant to a liquor by the drink license. So I'm not sure how that would be done in a farmer's market anyway. So I would recommend we don't proceed with anything regarding liquor at this time.
I was wondering, under the vendor requirements and limitations, could you give some examples of what is included in sample tasting requirements?
Those are regulated by the state, and any vendor that would want to vend at the market would have to be up to speed with the regulations by the state. We would just be leasing them space at the market, but we would make sure that they have all their documentation. There are permits that need to be filed with the state in order to do this. There are ABC rules. So
Additional city permits as well, Gary?
Excuse me, I missed that.
Kathleen was talking about permits required
For sample tasting.
for sample tasting.
I'm not certain. That would better be put to the city clerk. I'm not sure if we have the sample tasting requirements. I think are regulated by the state, not
State.
by the city.
Not by the city.
So we don't have any other permits
I don't
in
believe
regards
so.
to that?
Okay, all right.
Another one, you've indicated that space may be tight in the vicinity of Friendship Square, but on requirement limitation number 8, it says specific tasting area which shall be of a size and design that the persons conducting the tasting can be observed and controlled. How do we fit a space in if the space is tight?
well, I think we'd have to limit those that were in attendance. I don't think all of these people would come on the same day.
No, but if you have a card table, a table-size booth, where does the rest of the space come from to keep people?
In a limited area. I think we'd have to just carve out a space and limit it to that space.
Oh, salvation arrives.
Here we go.
We're getting a crowd up here.
That's right.
We are.
Good afternoon.
Rod Hall, city attorney.
This is be all controlled by the state. The state has rules for any, but he's going to dispense and do tastings. It's all controlled by the state statute, and there's certain requirements they'd have to meet before they would even be allowed to do this.
Are Art's questions about space under those state requirements?
Yes. They just have to be in a place where whoever's doing the dispensing can observe everybody who's sampling.
Sounds like it's going to be so tight they can't help but.
Yeah. And the liquor part, too, is also regulated by the state. They just actually have added these sample tastings within the last couple of years to allow the expansion of wine and beer and liquor in the state
Kathleen,
for the distribution of.
you had something else?
So in observing the Capital City Market in Boise, there are 10 by 10 canopy spaces, and they're throughout the whole street. They're not in a designated zone or an area. They're just on the street like any other vendor, and they're interspersed. But they are 10 by 10 canopies, and the tasting appears right there at the booth.
And also the person dispensing has to be employed by the winery or
Yep.
the brewery.
Actually, I see the whole issue as being something on the order of value added to agricultural production. To my mind, not terribly far removed from baking cinnamon rolls out of wheat or something. The alcohol content is an added layer of complexity, but other than that, it's still people associated with agriculture, agricultural production, and value added. And if the restrictions can be adhered to, I don't see a problem with it myself.
Yeah, that's my whole deal, too. I don't have a problem with it. It's as long as, we're staying in line with what's allowed by state code. I guess my question and for Rod would be, this is something we could do by resolution and we wouldn't have to do by ordinance?
Yes, and I think we were thinking that this year would just be a test run to see if it even works. And every year, to allow alcohol in the parks, you can do it by resolution. So if this is something you want to go forward with each year, you could do that.
Gary?
One of the things we talked about in the remote past is whether or not the council wants to consider having some sort of, by resolution, ability to have a beer garden, something like that, in the public rights-of-way within limited circumstances. Council was not ready to talk about that a couple of years ago. In order to move this along, you are allowed by resolution to allow within a city park. Friendship Square being in the center of the city seems a perfect match for a pilot program, so that's why it's
That's why we're
brought
talking
forward.
the park and not the booths up and
Yes,
down the street.
exactly.
Okay.
So what happens if it becomes more popular? Because currently we're proposing 3 vendors, and here we have 7 wineries and 6 breweries. What happens when, I'll say when instead of if, it wants to get larger? Where do we put them?
Well, I would doubt you'd see anything this year beyond what is being proposed. If the commission wants to proceed with making this more of a permanent situation, we'll likely be approaching you with some sort of change in our ordinance to allow just what I indicated.
In the right-of-way.
Yes, some kind of limited within a certain area for certain events, allowing the council to issue a resolution just as they do here. And the council could do it by a blanket resolution for farmers market for that season. Could have, if you wanted to make it one Saturday out of 4, you could craft the resolution however you would like.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we had that on the last Saturdays before, that we had wine sales before.
But that was in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, this is for the month of October 2014 only.
Correct.
It is a pilot
Yep.
program. Okay. Now, what about package sales? You're talking primarily through here about tastings. I mean, if someone likes what they taste, can they buy a bottle right there?
Correct.
That's what
That'll
it's
be the
about,
whole
yeah.
purpose of it, right?
Yep.
Is there adequate verbiage in the resolution to indicate that?
Yes, and that's also controlled by state statute. They would not be able to break the seal there and consume it.
And again, that's not so different from what you're allowing in parks for rendezvous and those activities. You're allowing liquor to be sold, or excuse me, beer and wine to be sold by the drink, so for consumption on premises. This actually is less of a risk than consumption on premises.
I guess the only thing is that this resolution would have to come back to us with the liquor all struck from it, because that, we're not including that right now because of the state's
At this
rules.
point.
I mean, unless the state's rules change where somebody, you mentioned that they do allow tasting now, but I would imagine that's at the distillery, and I don't think you can do it at the liquor store.
No, you can actually do it in stores.
Yeah, I was not
And
aware of
for the
that,
restaurants.
but I think what you've heard from the commissioners that they had not
Yeah,
contemplated
this is something they're going to
liquor,
have to
so
think, but,
Right.
if
so
we
I would,
excise liquor out of there for the limited purpose
This
of this
time, yeah.
resolution.
Limited time of this resolution,
Yeah.
and then,
Next year, you
See
could
what
consider
happens.
it again if you like.
okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a comment, if this is for October, the farmer's market will be in the parking lot for homecoming,
for one weekend.
for that one weekend, so
That create a problem,
is
Gary?
that, because that's probably going to be a
Good-
nice
Good
weekend to
point,
test
thank
it.
you.
Well, it's a parking lot open to the public. There's no prohibition. I'd have to think about
Well,
that.
I can just add a line in there to say that,
Okay.
allow that
Because
exception
it's
for the
not, it's
parking
not
lot too for
part, it's
homecoming.
not part of the park unless you put it by the playground, which I don't think we want to do.
We can specifically say, if you would like, the Jackson Street parking lot
Or
also.
that's-
We
yes.
probably need to do that because our prohibition is open container
Open
on
container,
public
public,
rights of way and public spaces open to the public.
Good point, Shirley.
We can fix that.
Anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Can this,
Is it going to get fixed in time for the first October market, I guess?
It's not contemplated for it'd be like 3 weeks in October it would be good for.
We'll have it changed and ready for you on October 6th.
should it, let's put it on regular agenda. You got to make the change with the liquor.
Okay.
It's something that
There's a
being on the
couple
regular
other things.
agenda might create some public comment rather than putting it on consent, Jerry. It's
Put it on the regular.
it's not
agenda.
dramatic, but it's enough of a change, I think we ought to go there, okay?
Thank you.
That's fine.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is Tyler Palmer, with a right-of-way trimming policy. Tyler, would you like to pick a few people from the audience to bring with you so you won't look so alone up here?
Yeah, I'm going to feel pretty alone. I might make Rod come up in a minute if there's any questions about some of this. All right. Well, thanks for having me back on this.
Again?
Yeah, again. As you'll recall, we discussed this a few weeks back. This is part of an ongoing conversation as we've attempted to formalize our tree trimming policy and bring that to the council. I'm going to briefly review the policy, go over the alterations that we've made since the last time we've met, and then I'll field any questions that anybody has. The tree trimming is something that we have started to do annually in an attempt to keep up with the city. We just finished our fourth and final area in our first go-round with the tree trimming this year. Prior to that, tree trimming had happened. It had happened more on an as-needed, kind of an ad hoc basis. It was, hey, this area is getting real bad, let's go trim this. There wasn't a lot of notification, and it resulted in a lot of frustration from people about their landscape as crews would show up and just start trimming. So we've tried to build a program that is that communicates with the public, that's transparent and lets them know what's going on, but also tried to educate so that part of that process is emphasizing the homeowner responsibility to maintain their vegetation within the property. A lot of reasons for that. I won't go over them ad nauseum, but just the safety of the traveling public, our ability to keep the streets swept and clean, pedestrians, sight triangles, a lot of different reasons to keep the vegetation within the policy that's been established. So the basics of this policy as it's presented here, and I need to apologize in the policy submission for this council meeting. There's a paragraph that still refers to a fee, and that's actually going to be it's restitution, and we'll make that correction before it goes to the council. It's restitution and not a fee.
So that's why there's no set fee mentioned here. It's going to be.
That's correct. We
It's going to be what it ends up being.
What the basis for the restitution will be for the amount assigned to the restitution.
An itemized whatever. This is how long it took us, and
right.
This is how many chainsaws we broke doing it. And
it'll be broken down by this is how long it took us, and this is the rate that we've determined for how long that took. As part of this process, so we notify homeowners for the area that we're trimming in the fall. That was actually due to a recommendation from a resident who we'd been notifying with 2 weeks advance notice, and they'd indicated that more notice and a season's notice so that they could trim at the proper time would be helpful. So there's the initial notification given in the fall, and that notification will let the resident know about the policy, let them know why the policy exists and what the expectations of them as the homeowner are with regard to their vegetation. And it lets them know that we'll be coming in the spring to do an inspection and to assure compliance with the policy. It also provides...
Interrupting you. It will be couched in terms of city ordinance requires.
That's correct.
Politely, you are required, expected, take care of the following, and then it presents the fact that we're coming through that part of town.
That's correct.
And what will occur should they not comply.
The goal of this program is to trim as little as we possibly have to, and so we want to...
The city crews.
Exactly, to have the city crews do as little trimming as possible. So we want to encourage people and make people aware that it is their responsibility, that there is an ordinance that dictates that, and that we are there to inspect for compliance. So that's the first notification. Subsequent notification will be sent out at least 2 weeks before the specific area is trimmed, and so that's done on a more street-by-street basis when the crews are arriving in an area. That notification is kind of a last shot over the bow saying, hey, we're on your doorstep. If there's trimming that had been put off or that you needed to have done, now's the time to do it. And it also provides, both of these forms provide contact information because we try and be flexible and work with people. If they have some extenuating circumstances or if there's something that, hey, we're working on this tree, can you give us another couple of weeks because X, Y, and Z? We really try and be very flexible and reasonable about those sorts of things.
You're interrupting you again. Your first one goes to everybody in the quadrant of town you're doing for that year.
That's correct.
The next year.
That's correct.
The second notice goes to those homes to which this applies. In other words, a home that doesn't have any trim to be trimmed wouldn't need to get the one 2 weeks prior.
Right. Most homes will end up getting one because if there is vegetation that is going to be within or potentially within at some point, we'd like to make them aware of what's going on. The guys, when they go out and do the door hangers, they don't have their sticks to measure precisely.
Right.
So it's an eyeball test, but yes, if we had someone who had a landscape that had nothing that was close, it wouldn't be, they wouldn't be given the second hanger. The first hanger, the goal is to keep everybody aware of it so that when they go to plant trees the next year, they're aware of what the ordinance says. At that point, the crews will go out then and they will begin the compliance inspections and they will do minor trimming to assure that things are in compliance. As they go through the areas, if they come across properties that they suspect will take more than an hour of labor to bring into compliance, they will then write down these properties, and so they'll write down addresses of those properties and bring those back to the shop. So they'll go through the areas, they'll bring into compliance everything that can be brought into compliance with minimal labor. Anything that's going to take far more labor will be documented, and then those residents will be sent, will go into the notification process, the official notification process, through legal to let them know, hey, this is in violation, this needs to happen, they'll get certified mail, et cetera. And so that's when it goes into the more lengthy process of this is what's coming down. If through that process they aren't compliant within the period that's designated, then we will go out and trim, and then restitution will be sought by the city for the labor that's performed by city crews to bring the properties into compliance.
Is that lienable, Gary?
Lienable as far as,
Collecting.
I don't believe you can lien their property taxes for unless you reduce it to a judgment, but we could collect it if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Yes, we can collect it.
Okay.
So there's the ordinance has been updated with language through Rod's office to make sure that the code, Chapter 5, Title 5, Chapter 8 allows for us to conduct the trimming process, and then you also have the updated right-of-way vegetation trimming policy in front of you that specifies the mechanism as was requested in our last meeting, and also defines what constitutes a crew as far as a crew hour and how we're looking at that, which were two things that we discussed at the last meeting. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Tyler, your rights-of-way vegetation trimming policy sheet
Yes, sir.
does not include under process the step that you explained where when they go out to do their trimming, if they encounter a property that in their determination will take more than an hour for the two-man crew to do, they don't do it, they come back to the office and start the process to notify people, we're going to do it, it's going to cost you, et cetera. I would think that up in your process that step needs to be called out.
Okay, so
Possibly right before the sentence paragraph that says the street maintenance workers performing vegetation trimming shall be trained, et cetera.
Well, it's mentioned in the third bullet down there.
It is, but when you're reading the process,
Right. And maybe make it a more,
less
of a paragraph, and maybe make
define
it
that
a
as part of the
step-by-step
process.
thing.
yeah, because I talked to Tyler on the phone earlier today because I got lost in how does this going to work step by step, and I think if it's going to be a policy that you can hand to people or people can look up and see exactly what are they going to do and do I care, it probably should be pretty clear in terms of what the steps are, Gary.
yeah, I think we can.
That's fine.
I think we can clarify that and add that.
The other question, Tyler, that I asked was, what would you estimate a quadrant of the city on an annual basis is going to cost the city to do this trimming that's required by code but that people don't do and we're going to do for them?
Up to this point, as I said, we've just finished the 4 areas on the first go-round, so there was a lot of more intensive trimming, let's say, for properties that had not been
Trust me, there's
compliant
still
for
a
a
few
long
out there
time.
that you need to, some work needs to be done.
Absolutely. It's costing us about $625 per lane mile, and what that translates to in an area per year is about $25,000 annually, is what it's cost us.
And that's because we're doing it all.
That's because we've gone through and just, well, there are residents that have decided to trim themselves when we've notified, but I would say probably 85% of the trimming has been conducted by city crews.
So even though it's taking less than an hour of a two-man crew, Gary, pickup truck and equipment, we're almost expending real money.
Well, I would say if it's less than an hour, we're gonna come out way less than that if they're spending less than an hour per.
I would be surprised. I mean, before, the 25,000 represents us doing everything. Would you want to venture a guess as to how many of these more than an hours you're going to incur in a quadrant?
We don't run into, on a percentage basis, the more than an hours aren't huge, but as far as consuming more time, they consume far more time. I mean, we'll go through and have 10 residents that take 20 minutes. You know, it's a little branch here, a branch there, but then we'll run into a residence that the guys can spend, 10, 12 hours sometimes if there's significant trimming that needs to happen. You'll get some shrubs, and the guys are making proper cuts on the shrubs, and if you have a whole bank that needs to be trimmed back, that can be a time-consuming process.
Okay.
And the hope is that through the language and with some continuity, that we will begin to get more people that will do their own trimming and stay compliant throughout the year.
Gary, do you have something?
Nope, I'm fine with it.
Art?
I'm good, too. I think it'll start getting traction and working better in the future. And I think that anything less than an hour just isn't worth dealing with because it's going to cost more in administrative costs than it will to be recovered. So when you start getting the big boys, yeah. And it's not like people won't have notice. I count, I think, 4 individual points at which people are notified of action. So it's not coming down the road as a surprise if anybody gets caught up in this. So I like it.
Ever forward.
A question for the city attorney. Rod? Please.
Don't feel so long, Rod.
Welcome. Better now, Tyler?
Yeah, better.
The additional wording that you've added to the ordinance respecting this type of work, help me, but it doesn't seem to read that if it takes us over an hour, we're going to bill you for it. It talks about violating provisions of the chapter subject to a misdemeanor charge, conviction, punished, and fined.
But part of the city policy would have to be the over-hour work before they'd even be cited, before this would even kick in. So we would have a city policy that we would have to rely on.
Yeah, I don't think you want to have get too specific in your ordinance, or you're going to be, we may make changes to the policy.
I'm just wondering if the ordinance covers what the policy will state. That's all. I'm just saying, is the change that's been implemented here
And
fitting the policy that Tyler's described to us?
yes, when we go and ask for reimbursement or the restitution part of the action, it says per our City of Moscow tree trimming policy. So it references the policy.
Okay. If you say we're good, we're good. What's your desires?
I'd say move forward. I mean, I think the actual policy itself, we talked about, taking that first paragraph of it and actually listing out the steps. But other than that, I think we're going the right direction.
Okay, Gary, can we get that change in the way the policy is on paper? And let's put this on regular agenda, and maybe we can get some publicity so people go buy hedge trimmers and clippers and stuff.
Okay.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, sirs, both. Okay. Next item is the is the playground equipment installation contract amendment, and Gary Reedner himself is going to present that, because I understand some of our Parks and Rec people are in education down in South Idaho.
They are. They're at the annual Idaho Recreation and Parks Conference in Twin Falls. So I'm briefed on this matter, been involved in it a little bit. You'll recall that several weeks ago we had put out bids or requests for proposals or bids on the replacement and installation, I guess, of 3 separate parks: at Totlot Playground in East City Park, the playground to be installed at Otness Park, and lastly, replacement of the Rotary Park playground. The equipment's been purchased. We were looking for someone to install it. It's a fairly narrow band of contractors who conduct this type of work, according to Dwight and Tom Grundon. There are 3 of them in the Intermountain West that seem to turn up for these, one of them being the contractor who's at discussion today, Picture Perfect Playgrounds. Our first request for proposals or bids, we got no responses at all. For whatever reason, time of year, everybody was busy. Didn't get any response. So we put it out again. We got 1 response and solicited the usual contractors to see if they wanted to respond. Picture Perfect Playgrounds responded with their bid of $29,000 and $958.19, so just shy of $30,000. At that time, when Tom Grundon presented to this committee, he indicated that, as Walter pointed out to me, he did not indicate what the estimate was by staff for the project, which in fact was approximately $70,000, but did indicate that it was surprisingly low, so he confirmed with the contractor that the bid was in fact valid. The contractor verified that the bid was valid. We proceeded, took it to council. Council, it was on the consent agenda. Council approved it. We received a call from the contractor last either Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, who indicated that his staff, who had actually responded to the bid, had somehow misinterpreted what the bid was for and had not bid the correct job. He bid the installation of the playgrounds, but also the engineered wood fiber rather than the spec'd concrete installation with padding that is much safer and lower maintenance. I shouldn't say much safer. It is, according to Dwight, it is safer than the engineered wood fiber, but because the engineered wood fiber has to be raked up and replaced almost constantly in order to get the cushioning effect, it's much safer for our children. The people use the playground with this padding.
It's a rubber or rubberized product,
rubberized matting,
which requires a concrete
base.
Yes. The wood
fibers are on top of some gravel or some other type of
not
base.
Concrete.
Not concrete. I think it's sand. I could be wrong.
Okay.
And again, I'm sorry, Dwight's not here to answer that. But so what we have at this point is the contractor contacted staff and said concrete was not included in the bid. I can't say whether the rubber matting was, but at least it wasn't complete. So the difference was going to be, and we still don't have a hard estimate, although I just see I received an email from Tom Grundon, and I do not have any further information on what the, just give me half a second here. Okay, still collecting data, but.
And the bid was a lump sum bid. It was not itemized. There was not a blank for concrete, a blank for rubberized. It was installed playground equipment.
Per specs, exactly. So the bid bond is 5% of the bid itself, amounts to just shy of $1,500. Briefed with the city attorney verifies that if the contractor wishes to void his bid, then our remedy is the bid bond itself, which is, like I said, about $1,500 on an up to estimated $70,000 project. So
that would be the process if the contractor being offered a contract at the amount he bid said, I will not sign this.
Exactly. So where we are right now is that is our remedy. I asked the city attorney about specific performance, which is the legal term for, okay, you bid it, you need to do it. What are our remedies? Can we force the contractor to do it? Essentially, the answer is no. It's a material issue, so because it's a material issue, we're limited to the bid bond, forfeiture of the bid bond. Okay, so we sit back. The next question to the city attorney, well, is it possible to expand the contract to include the concrete to do the job as was contemplated? Rod reviewed it, indicated that, and oh, by the way, the sole bidder on this project was Picture Perfect Playgrounds. The other vendors, any other vendors or contractors elected not to proceed. Rod indicates that it would in fact be legal to do so, that we could do that, expand the contract. Certainly there's no bidder in second place, unsuccessful bidder, who could raise bidding improprieties, and there certainly were no bidding improprieties. There was just a material mistake on the bid itself. So we looked at it and said, okay, what is the best way to do this? And looked at what is going to occur if we, in fact, void the bid, reject the contract, and put it out for bid again in the spring. We still have a limited number of contractors, as Tom indicated in his memo. Whether this contractor is going to retire and sell the business to one of his employees may be in the offing. I don't think that's material. However, the fact remains that the bidder contractor is willing to proceed at this time if we can come to an agreement on the concrete. It's legally sound to proceed in this way, so we looked at what is the advantage to the city to wait. It's doubtful. Usually you have an inflationary increase in construction costs, a bird in the hand, as it were. We have a solid bid on the installation of the equipment. We will get a solid estimation or solid quote on the concrete itself. They can do the work this fall. If we're able to do it, we have removed the playground at East City Park. Otness Playground is due to be installed this fall. Rotary Park remains the same. Obviously, if we could get them done, it would make Rotary safer. And there's currently no playground in East City Park or Otness. So those projects would have to be delayed till spring. As Tom indicated in his memo and Dwight validated, we would essentially just cordon off the area. The playgrounds wouldn't be installed, and we'd be looking at next spring. As you know, spring construction in this country is variable upon the weather, depending on how wet it is, so on and so forth. So what staff is looking for direction is, do we want to proceed at this time? If we can get a valid quote on the concrete, if we are within the $70,000 estimate, we're looking for direction to proceed. It's staff's recommendation based upon the fact that it was a material mistake. It is, however, legally fixable, and we're able to proceed and get these playgrounds in place for the public to use 6 or 8 months prior to when they would otherwise be constructed. So it does not seem as if there's anything to be gained by waiting, except the $1,500 forfeiture, which, by the way, is not the intent. It isn't intended to gain anything for the city. It's to make contractors hopefully do the right thing. So that's staff's recommendation at this time. So as long as we have the budget, we're ready to go. It is legally okay to move ahead. The city attorney's given is okay. It'd be our recommendation that we get a firm quote on the contract for the concrete, and if it's within that $70,000 estimation, that staff be allowed to enter into a contract with Picture Perfect Playgrounds for installation of the 3 playgrounds.
Gentlemen.
I'm assuming, and Dwight's not here to answer, but maybe you have to be playground certified to install this stuff, and that's why I was wondering, could we do it ourselves? But obviously we must not have that certification.
And I can't answer the question as to whether we can do it with our own crews. I do know that it takes an expertise to do it. Dwight and Tom both indicated to that in both of the previous presentations. I can't say whether we would be able to do that or not. I think, I believe there is a certification required, but I do not have that expertise.
Well, as for me, I'm not comfortable in going ahead with modifying a bid to something over 100% of the base bid value. To me, an error of bidding of that magnitude negates the bid, and in my mind, regardless of the sad fact that we have to put off use of playgrounds for 8 months, I think we have to go back and rebid the whole thing from scratch. I don't like the way it looks, the way it feels. It's obviously an oopsie, and that's not bad, but I can't get my head around the fact that an alteration of over 100% of the base bid would be necessary to remedy the situation. And my opinion is we got to go back and just bid de novo.
If I may. And your discomfort with that is because of the magnitude of the mistake that was made. As I indicated, the city attorneys indicated it is legally defensible. So if that's a discomfiture, then certainly that's something that we need direction on.
Mr. Hall.
Good afternoon again. If I could add a little bit something to that. The facts are going to be very important in this particular matter, especially since we only had one bidder. The city had expectations, even though council might not have been aware of, that it was going to be $70,000. When it came in at less than half of that, we were concerned and we asked. And they still made a mistake. And so Twice. So if we went out to rebid, it's like, or if we didn't like that, we could have went to the next bidder, but there is no other bidder. So now you're looking at remedies at this situation. I think that gives the city the ability to modify the contract up towards our expectations without really any real issue on that.
Yes, sir.
I would ask Rod, too, I believe it's the law as well, that if you have non-responsive bids, which you reject this, you have no responsive bids, that you then are able to go out and get the labor done or get the job done on direct quotes. So that makes it legal as well. So, again, the issue isn't, I mean, we have the ability to do it. We have the ability to do it within the law. The question is, what is going to be best for the community? We're just looking at how do we get the playgrounds deployed as quickly as possible. It's up to the council to give us the direction as to whether you're comfortable with that resolution or not.
Yes, sir.
I also think appearances are everything, that when a government's acting, to be up and up. Here, I don't think there's anybody that would make an accusation that the city is trying to do something underhanded. It's all out in the open. There is a material mistake, and so I think we have the ability to come up with every remedy within the law that the city wants to move forward with.
Councilman Wayne Krause would like to come up and have
Or Wayne does.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, when I'm say, like Rod said, we only had one bidder. I would lean more Art's direction if there were more than one. But again, if there were more than one, we would have seen that big gap as well at that time. But you know, I think that we need to get the parks in, and I think that we're doing this in an open fashion right now. That you know, we're going to see what comes with the concrete quote, and I'm hoping it doesn't come out at $40,000 to put us over that 70. But I can't see how it would. But.
Yes, sir.
Dan, you asked a question about whether you have to be certified to install the playground equipment. I don't know what may have happened over the last, I don't know if it's been 5 or 6 years since Lions Club installed all that playground equipment, but that was all done with volunteer labor.
It's not a city park, though.
It's a county park.
It's a county park, but whether it's a city ordinance, I don't know. But anyway, they did install that. Besides that, I tend to agree with Dan. I would be more concerned, Art, had there been more than one bid. It's obvious that if there had been more than one bid, that then we would be in a totally different situation than what we are right now. We ran into some situations this year with inflated costs. One was with the joint playground because of a lot of work that's out there right now for public works projects. Perhaps that's the reason we only got one bid on this. I would be concerned of two things if we hold this off until next fall or next spring, and that would be that, A, the inflation would run it up higher than what we have budgeted, and number two, that maybe we wouldn't if we received no bids at all. There's always the distinct possibility that that the company that already bid and that we're discussing about, they may decide, well, I don't think I want to bid on it now. And so we could end up with no bids. A bid's a bid. And I don't think it won't work for us to hold them to that bid because they can't do it. They'll give up their $1,500 bond, and we're not in really any better shape than we would be by taking it. So I would like to see us attempt to negotiate something with them. They made an error. There's no question they made an error, but they weren't the only one that made an error. I think we did too. I know that staff.
We asked twice.
But you know what? We have a lot of experience, and if our engineers are saying we think it's going to cost $70,000 and it comes in at $27,000, maybe there should have been a flag that had been thrown up, and we should have.
Something's got to be wrong.
Something had to be wrong there. So there's probably some blame that can go around to everybody. But I want to move forward with this, and I want to see this get done now. I don't want to see inflated costs, or I don't want to see the chance of no bids coming in next spring.
Thank you, Wayne. Tom Lamar, council member, has an opinion or a feeling or something?
Something. I also, I believe, would like to get this done now. I'd like to see us move this forward. It is unfortunate that we had this error with the concrete cost. On that of the concrete cost, I'm interested in finding out why it costs $35,000 to put concrete into 3 playgrounds. That does seem high to me, but at $100 a yard. But perhaps this is the labor and the concrete itself.
No, it is.
So I'd be interested in seeing that
when
it comes to us. But my preference is now to move this forward. I think the construction season will be better this fall anyway than in the spring. I think we'll tear up the ground a lot less, or they'll tear up the ground a lot less. And I believe also that if this had been a multiple bidder situation, it would have been a different situation. But my preference is to just accept what we have and move it forward.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Yeah, Gary.
Yeah, I would agree that I think Tom just indicated if we'd had multiple bidders, then chances are it would have become obvious that one was off. And I am sympathetic to Wayne's comments. However, I'm not sure what staff's responsibility is other than contacting the bidder and saying,
Are you sure?
Are you sure that your bid is valid, and is this the bid you wish to submit? And they do.
They could have called out the $70,000 to the committee.
Well, they did to the committee. They mentioned that to us.
Not $70,000.
I can't recall that they did.
No, it was
looked
not.
At the
It was not
looked at the CCSR. It was not.
But be that as it may, how do we proceed? You cannot. You've got a 2-to-1 here at this table for accepting. We can move it to council, which is in 2 weeks, and we can take it to full council and take it to a vote. That's probably the best we can do at this point, Gary.
Would have to go to regular agenda. By that time, we should have a firm amount for the concrete. Again, we just wanted to look and see whether you wanted to see it again. So we can have that ready to go and get the final on that. And I'll verify with staff that as soon as the council's direction is gained on October 6th, if the direction is to move ahead, that they can still get the work done this fall.
Okay.
Well, I guess the other question is, can they get the work done this fall still? If they can't, then...
If they can't, then exactly.
We're done.
You can...
Could still hold them to the bid.
And alternatively,
you can work into the fall. You can also, and maybe that's the concession they may have to be willing to make, you can blanket concrete. I mean, you can put concrete down as long as the ground's not frozen under it. If we haven't gotten a terribly hard ground freezing frost, and it's certainly possible to blanket the ground beforehand to keep it from freezing, and we could go ahead and work into the freezing.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the technicians, but certainly there are ways to do it.
Yeah.
well, while we're still in speculation land, there's also the equal possibility that come spring there might be more than one company out there available to bid, as well as none. So I still think, and I'm not going to be here on the 6th of October, so...
that doesn't make this very easy.
No, it doesn't. So anyway, my comments remain that I don't feel comfortable doing anything less than rebidding the whole thing, but that's...
I'm sure your colleagues will make sure that that viewpoint is discussed.
Art's not here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we can go on consent agenda, right?
Gary, if staff could make sure on the 6th that Art's feelings about this item are part of the staff report, please.
We can do that.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands up, I will move on to the next item on the agenda. Full council for that item on the 6th, and staff comments regarding Art's position.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our agenda listed items. We have 2 reports. The first is the Moscow Farmers Market canning grant report. Kathleen may or may not have brought samples with her, but we will find out.
Would be nice.
I wanted to do a canning demo, Wayne.
Well, I would love to have seen it, but I'm not sure we've got time with the size of the agenda we had. Amanda Argona, who is... Argona, my apologies, who is the AmeriCorps volunteer, somewhat kind of paid some time, volunteer coordinator for the Moscow Farmers Market.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the presenters, if I could be excused, I have some matters that are pressing.
I will be happy to allow you to, but I need to make sure that they don't have a problem.
Is that fine with you guys?
That's fine. You may have a pumpkin beer on your desk.
Thank you.
As punishment.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
So I came onto the market last year at the tail end of their canning grant. So this was the first year that I was here for the entire year of the canning grant, and I helped out with securing letters of recommendation for us to apply for the 14 year. So this is just some highlights. The Jardin Home Brands Company, which owns Ball and Kerr, they gave us promotional items, and this is just sort of a better looking snapshot of the items they gave us. And we actually priced out the raffle products to the right, and how much that would have cost us should we just want to pursue this on our own without that grant.
So what's the 10,000 under coupons?
We got 10,000
individual
flyer coupons,
hand-outable coupons of each of those, okay?
Yep, and that's, then we have booklets. We had 5x7 sort of cards, rack cards that were given out. Stickers aren't even on here because we had way too many that I wasn't even going to bother with that. But some of the extra things that we received were the sample packets, which we've had outside the arts department if you've ever walked by. And we still have plenty of those. So if you're looking for any of them, come down to the office. And one of the extra promotional items they gave were the 50 plastic cutting boards and then the 200 packages of the wooden lid tags. So they're just in place of using stickers or just writing right on the jar. They're cute little wood tags that you can use string to put onto your jars. So this is specifically the Food Saver demonstration items that we received. So as you can see, the vacuum sealing system costs the most.
So were those reusable by us, the ones that aren't consumable?
What do you mean?
We still have the vacuum sealing system?
Yep. We keep everything that they gave us.
Okay.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And we still have some bags left over, so if anyone has a Food Saver system or would like to check out the one that we have at the Arts Department, we still have lots of those items. And then this is the Ball canning. Last year we received the enamel water bather. This year we received another one, so now we have 2 water bathers, plus they sent us the automatic canning system, which Kathleen is taking home tonight. Just dropped it off to her.
Salsa.
And as you can see, that's upwards of $300, and that was off of the Ball website, that quote. And then we had prize raffles. So based on the inventory they gave us, I put together 5 prizes to raffle off each time we did a demo. and we were required by the grant to do a canning demonstration and a food-saving demonstration each month, so June, July, and August. And I think we were supposed to start in May, but product was low in the market for us. So that means we raffled off 6 packages of these. So each of those prizes was raffled off each week. So we put out a flyer to get some volunteers to lead the canning and food-saving demonstrations. And most of the demonstrations were led by market staff, so we did 4 demonstrations. We did the Tayberry Jam, which was the first demonstration we did. If you don't know what a Tayberry is, it is a cross between a raspberry and a loganberry. We did the chicken stir-fry marinade using the Food Saver system, salad in a jar, which was also using the Food Saver system, and then blanching vegetables. And then we had Rebecca Alexander, or Salamiri, one of the two, from Brush Creek Creamery. She demoed maraschino cherries, canning them. And then we had a new vendor, Lodgepole Artful Eats and Curiosities. His name's Alex. He just came on this year. He demoed bread and butter pickles, which actually had our largest audience watching that, of over 40 people.
What was your attendance, your audience attendance at these?
We're going to go into that. I'm pretty sure I have that number in here. So then we just have produce contributions from the following vendors in the market. It was really great. People were definitely willing to give us produce, and if not, buy it from them at a discounted price. So just to kind of look at, 10,000 sheets of coupons, that wasn't just, we put that out at the market, we put that out at the arts department, but we kind of distribute that into the city and beyond as well. So this is just, we sent it down to UI Extension with Kathy Tift, and she gave it to 3 other farmers markets. We sent some stuff over to Pullman. Book people really loved having some of the promotional items last year, and so we sent stuff to them, as well as the co-op. And then we also gave coupons to our vendors at the market, who there's a lot of them who do canning, if not to sell at the market, then just to have at home in general. And then highlights, we teamed up with the High Five Grant for International Can It Forward Day, which fell on a market day, August 16th, and that's that upper right-hand corner picture where kids got to make no-heat instant berry jam. They got to take it home with them, including those little tags. The upper left-hand corner, that's our largest audience, and that was well over 40 people for the bread and butter pickle demonstration. And then I'm also getting together with the UI Sustainability Center to do a canning event. We're not going to make the National Canning Day date, which is October 23rd, but we're looking to do it a week or 2 after. And then if we're just kind of looking at the numbers of it, to the left column shows you what we have left out of the product we were given. So if you want coupons, come on down to the arts department. We got plenty of them. And then we're looking at people reached via promotional items. That's over 1,000 people. And that's, again, giving those things out into the community and down into the valley. If we're looking at people just at the demos themselves, it's over 200. And I would say between 20, at the max 40, that would show up and sit down for the demonstration, not to mention just people walking by that I would hand stuff out to. So I really tried hard to keep track of what was going out to everyone. Money spent on demonstrations, that number is actually a little bit higher. We missed the marinade, what we had to buy for that marinating demo, so that number is actually about $130. And then money awarded to the Moscow Farmers Market. So the grant itself had 2 money disbursements, one of $800, one of $400. So we actually received $1,200 from the grant itself.
Cash. In
cash, yep. And due to our amazing reporting that we did for July and August, or was it June and July, we received $550 worth of prize money. So I believe one of them, cash again, was for just overall best community demonstration, and then another one was for sharing via Facebook and social media. And then the total value of those supplies that I kind of showed you earlier in the beginning of the PowerPoint is over $2,000. And then we have a brief video demonstration I'd just like to show you. If you didn't get to see any of these demos at the market, this is what you missed. So just, go and click that.
You don't want to put anything towards the bottom like croutons, anything that when it hits the oil or liquid will get mushy, okay? All this stuff, it's all going to be just fine in the liquid. So you stuff your jar, you kind of gauge like, that's like a lunch portion for me. So once you get your jar filled, all you do is just get your regular canning stuff. So you got your lid, right? For you canners out there, you don't have to get this hot. You don't have to because we're not water bathing it. So you want to make sure that the top's, fine and the seal is good. And then all you do is just place that on top. I got a little piece of tomato on here. And then you're just going to attach this. It just slips right on. You don't have to screw it or anything. Once you get the top on there fine, it slips on just easy. So you see it just goes right on. Then you're just going to attach the accessory tool. And then on this food saver, which is what you can find at Costco, this is the model that you can get there. Tri-State, Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, you can find these food savers at a lot of different stores. On this one, there's an accessory button. And all you have to do is push the accessory button, and that activates the hose, the tube. So all it's going to do, and there's no cool part about this. There's no watch it as it does something. It doesn't do anything cool, sorry. For those of you that are looking for what's it doing? I think I saw some liquid do something. It doesn't actually do anything cool. It just sucks the air out. When you hear the thing turn off, you can pull the hose. You can take the top. Now, here's the trick. How do I know if it actually did its job? Well, if it didn't do its job when I turn it over, that lid will come right off. And you can see it didn't. So, you put this in. What this does is 7 to 10 days from now, this salad is going to be just as fresh as when you made it today.
And with that, that's the canning report for 2014.
Who knew Barry was so talented?
Oh, he is very talented.
The fairgrounds is looking for him now to do demos.
And I think he's going to be demonstrating one more food-saving event where he's cooking deer in the market, and then he'll show everyone how to use your food saver to save it.
Okay.
So that's everything.
Good report, and apparently good reporting to get the additional $550 worth of...
Kathleen did one report, and I did another one.
Yep.
So.
Okay, well, great.
So now, if anybody knows of another food item that might be a good grant, we'll be looking for another food grant for 2015.
Okay. And like you said, you've got some samples and some pieces and parts and things that if people come by the Arts Department office on the first floor,
we will happily give them.
They can say, what have you got? You can say, there it is, and they can pick and choose what they want.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Jen Piffner is going to do a report on the Vandal Town Block Grant Party. Is that correct?
Party report.
Vandal Town.
Yeah, no block grant for this. We wish, but not yet.
Vandal Town, though.
This is the Vandal Town block party that we've talked about in a couple of committee sessions.
And I hear it's coming up.
It's coming up. It's this Friday. We have two great bands that'll be joining us. It's Voodoo City Radio, and then we've got Simba and the Exceptional Africans. We're closing the majority of Main Street, which will actually be from 1st to 6th. And we've got bands at either end. So we're going to kind of bookend our Main Street. All of our businesses are looking forward to this. We'll have different things going on the street. Vendor booths, including we've got a photo booth going on. We'll have lots of prizes to give away. We've had some great donations from the U of I and some other folks. So we'll be working, actually the University of Idaho has been kind enough to lend us their prize wheel. So we'll be working the prize wheel in Friendship Square, giving some things away, and just really welcoming folks to our community, some new and returning students and dads that weekend as well. It's Friday night of Dads weekend. So.
And you're getting good publicity on the campus itself, you think?
We are trying our hardest. They're a big group, but everybody knows about it, so we'll continue to push the message out and make sure everybody knows they're invited to this
And
event.
someone told me that Mayor Lambert was a fan of this event.
Mayor Lambert's a huge fan of this event.
Welcome. Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's been kind of fun. Chair Walter and Art and Dan. We've got Jen here has done a terrific job about getting this thing spearheaded with a number of different people, and Gina Teruscio as well at the chamber, and her and I've been downtown, talked to a number of businesses downtown in the past few weeks. And yes, the university folks know this as well, especially the Senate. The Student Senate, I talked to their president, Austin, and some of their other members of their Senate about talking to us to the frat houses as well as the sororities about bringing dads down. So I think it's going to be a terrific event. We'll see what happens. It's this Friday night. Gene and I are going to do a live spot on the radio tomorrow about this, or Friday morning about it. I'm sorry, Friday morning.
Is that a Z Fund?
Oh, whatever it is, I don't
Probably,
know. But
yes.
Gene and I got to take the radio station over Friday morning so we can talk about this. So it's going to be a kind of a fun event, and it's a nice town and gown relationship. I know President Stevens and his wife will be down there that Friday night as well. So there's going to be a number of us, and I encourage all councilors to be down there and walk around. And we don't know what will happen other than I hope it's a fun event. And
Work the prize wheel.
yeah, it'll be kind of fun. So
I plan on planting myself down there and letting the people go by me.
There you go. There you go. One other thing, this has come up, I think, several times in the community to do something to close Main Street, even beyond our amazing farmers market. And so recognizing those businesses downtown who have tossed us around before and, working with us as we try this pilot has been a good time. And so we appreciate their
I hope those Main Street
focus as well.
businesses take advantage of the number of bodies that are going to be placed in front of their
That's
doors
true.
on
That's
Friday
true.
night.
Yeah, I think it's typically a busy night for them, but this should take it up quite a
And
bit.
the hours for this are?
This is 6 to 9 p.m. on Friday night,
Okay.
Downtown Moscow, Idaho. So we look forward to it. 70
The
degrees and 10%
flagship city
chance,
of the
so
state of Idaho.
I'm paying attention.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen?
Thank you.
I'm ready to go when you are.
thank you, Gene.
I think we've done pretty well to have the agenda we did and to get through only a few minutes later than people expected. Thank you, one. Thank you all. We're adjourned.